Well, I'm going to get started if everybody's y'all here, right? Well, I said 1:30, but how is everybody doing today? Good. Hot, huh? Yeah. Well, it's cooler here than it is on parts of the moon. Okay, now let's see. I bet you were alive when they went to the moon, right?
I do not know.
All right, good man. How about you? Were you alive when you went to the moon?
Yes.
No. Well, when you went to the moon, okay.
I will live there.
All right. Raise your hand if you actually remember the moon landings. Where were you?
I was at home,
Oh, where was that?
Galway, New Jersey.
Ah,
Morrisville, Pennsylvania.
yeah, and you watched it?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you watch it?
I was 2.
Well, that counts.
But I remember my parents
Yeah.
saying that we watched it together.
One of my earliest memories is of sitting on the bed with my dad. I'm 62, and we watched John Glenn take off. Right? They estimate that 600 million people watched it live. That was at the time, that was probably about a third of the world, not a third, about a little less than a quarter of the world's population. I'm not sure that any television broadcast has ever matched that, of that many people watching it all at the same time. Now, for the young ones here, you have to remember, the world technologically was very different back then. Oh my God,
How different?
there was no internet.
So,
Good man. The parents here? He's going to be fine. All right? There was no internet. There was barely color television. It was difficult to do any live broadcast. Okay? There was no cable television. There was one phone company, AT&T. And I've yet to find out how much they charged Richard Nixon when he called the moon. Okay? I'm sure they've passed it on to us, but it's a very different world. Okay? Now let me give you a little bit of background. And today, of course, is the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing. I think actually roughly now. Time gets a little weird when you get out into space. Depended, of course, on where you were. I was in California. Yes, sir.
a day in space is a month on Earth.
A day on the moon is.
Well, a month on the moon is a year.
Nah, you were right the first half. All right. Pretty good, though. Okay. I can tell you this. The astronauts kept 2 times. They kept Houston time because that's where mission control was. And probably more important for them, they kept what was called mission elapsed time because that's what their schedule was set to. Okay. But by Eastern Standard Time, if I recall correctly, it was roughly now, 1 o'clock or so, 1:30, something like that. All of the landings occurred. First of all right, you young folks, what's this? Okay. Which side of the moon is that? Is that the side that we see or the side that we don't see?
The side that we don't see.
Try again.
The side that we do see.
Yeah, what's that?
The side that we don't see.
What's the difference between the two?
One dark, one light.
Yeah. Okay. All the landings took place on the side that we see. Oh, and by the way, there's no dark side of the moon. Okay, there's a Pink Floyd album, all right, but it's the far side of the moon. They all receive the equal amounts of light. Yes, sir.
And in one side of the moon is a little bit bumpier.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
I learned that in Midnight of the Moon in Jack and Annie Fox with Pennsylvania moon.
Okay. that the two sides, shh, guys, I gotta remember I'm not a teacher. I don't have to shh anymore. I don't have to shush down the class. It's good they're making noise. They're excited. Yeah, the two sides are very different, and we're not sure why. Okay? The best guess is that the flatter side may be due to the Earth's gravitational pull somehow at these flat, what they call mare, or seas. Okay? Or it may simply be accident, who knows. But the far side, okay, is much more pockmarked and much less flat. Okay? All the landings took place on the side that we see. All right? It was easier. It was safer. Okay? They did discuss, there was some consideration of doing a far side landing. But it would have been too complicated because you're out of touch. When you're over this, you're out of touch with everything. Literally everything. All right? Which people had that experience. But they would have had to put communication satellites in orbits, which they could have done. But they never did it. The Chinese, of course, just landed a few months ago, landed an automated rover on the far side of the moon. And they put a communication satellite out in what's called the Lagrange point, which basically stays between the two. All right, so all the landings occurred on the side that we see. They all occurred basically during the lunar morning. Okay, they wanted the sun low on the horizon, okay, because they were concerned about basically the impact of the sun, okay, and there's no air, so the heat doesn't dissipate, but there's nothing filtering the sun either. The air conditioning suits, they were concerned about the workings of the suit air conditioning, and it does give you extreme temperature ranges. You can get 200 below in the shadow and 200 above in the sunlight, right with a line there. Now, fortunately, a fact that people don't know. People go, how could you design a suit that would... They didn't have to. The only places where it mattered were the bottoms of their feet, because there's no air to conduct any heat or anything like that. So it was really only a concern at the bottom of the boots, where they had extra thick soles, and they weren't standing around in one place. Okay? Now, let me give you some background here. Okay? All right, first of all, I don't know why I did this. I'll send this around. If you look at it, this is the latest high-resolution imaging. If you look at this side, it does mark all the landing sites, American and Soviet. I think it has Chinese, and I think that's the only people that have landed anything on the moon. I know the Japanese have had orbiters. The Israelis tried it. It's still not easy to get something on the moon. The Indians maybe, and the Japanese maybe landed something. They're all roughly in the lunar equator here, okay? But you can look at this, okay? You take it, send it around. All right, it's not a basketball. All right, first of all, you can go as far back. What are you going to call a rocket? Okay?
A rocket ship.
Okay, all right. Is that a rocket ship?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one, all right?
I just call it stories.
Okay, but let's go back, way back for a little bit. Do you think a caveman had a rocket ship?
No.
Oh, I disagree with you. Okay. Could a caveman pick up a pole?
Yes.
Could he throw it?
No.
Try again.
Yes.
Could that be a rocket ship?
No.
Yes.
I said
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Good man. What is it? It's a projectile. Okay. Presumably a projectile that does something. So if a bow and arrow, sure, you can consider that a missile launcher. Deadly one. Okay. The Chinese probably had the first rockets. gunpowder, and I don't think they used it as weapons. Maybe they did. Fireworks and whatnot. The first modern rockets, the first guy to really think about them, Konstantin I can't pronounce it, Tsiolkovsky, all right, Russian scientist. I don't think he ever built, but his basic theories were correct. All right, they were starting to understand gravity at that time. They understood the distance to the moon. He did speculate about traveling to the moon. Came up with an interesting problem, basically, that we still deal with, the rocket problem. In the end, it's limited how much you can really lift off the ground in one rocket, okay? And how big you can realistically build one rocket. Does anybody know why? What is the basic problem? Yeah.
So it's like if you want to put so much into one rocket, that rocket has to be bigger, which means it will be heavier, and then it will be harder to get into space.
Okay.
And you can't forget about gravity.
Okay. Well, the gravity is a constant. All right. The gravity here on Earth, it's not going to change. Okay. So as long as you know that, if you add weight, do you have to add fuel?
Yeah.
And does that add weight? Yeah, it does. You eventually hit a point of like where it's sort of, it ain't worth it, or there's no return. In this, most of the fuel was burned lifting other fuel. Okay. And that's why, kids today say, why didn't you reuse everything? It was all a waste. It couldn't do it. As soon as you were done with it, get rid of it. Use it once, get rid of it. All right, now, Wernher von Braun. He was a Nazi, first of all. He's the guy, let me be clear. Wernher von Braun is the guy that got us to the moon. Brilliant engineer. He was a Nazi, okay? He built the V2 rockets, all right, which were launched primarily out of Peenemünde, Germany. Rained terror on London and parts of Belgium, Antwerp. All right, they killed thousands of people. They were pretty useless militarily. It didn't do anything to change the game, but it was one frightening weapon, and it was clearly a real rocket. It could travel in space. Here's a thought for you. I don't have it here, but the first photograph of Earth from space is taken from a V2 rocket. All right, a Nazi V2. Fortunately, it was one captured by us that we launched. All right, the Nazis were working on the atomic bomb. Now you think about Adolf Hitler with a V2 and an atom bomb. That's a frightening thought. Okay, he did use Jewish slaves to build the rocket. He was not a genocidal murderer. I don't think he was particularly, he just wanted to build rockets. He was born in Nazi Germany. They were going to support it. We had Robert Goddard. How many of you have heard of him? All right, and he's local in Worcester and Auburn, Massachusetts. He was also launching rockets in the early 1920s. Von Braun's that's a real rocket, okay? It's not his first rocket, but that's a real rocket. Goddard's are kind of funny because they're kind of spitting chewing gum. He has things like wine bottles with those little Bunsen burner things, but they worked. Okay, liquid fueled rockets. I think the highest he ever got one up was about 2,000 feet. But interesting thing, he took it to the U.S. Army, and they said, we're not interested. Wernher von Braun went to the Nazi military, who at the time was operating under the Versailles Treaty, which really limited their weapons, but it didn't anticipate new technological developments. So they said, okay, we'll take a look at this, right? So they went ahead with the rocket development, whereas we didn't, okay? But as World War II was coming to an end and we're going into Germany, we were like, we want those rocket guys, all right? Wernher von Braun and his people took a look and said, we got Russians coming that way, Americans coming that way. Let's see. These guys only hate us. These guys will eat us alive. Let's go that way. Okay. So we got von Braun, all right, and his people. All right, and yes, sir.
Wasn't there sort of like competition between the Soviet spies and the Americans?
Oh, absolutely, to get them, yes.
Were the scientists pawns, or were they hiding, or were they actually kidnapped by the Russians or the Americans?
I think the best answer to that is yes. I'm not that expert in it. There's something called Operation Paperclip, which is the detailed story of getting those guys out. My guess is that it's probably a bit of both. Yeah. Von Braun, I know, they chose to head towards the west, the British and the Americans, because the Nazis had killed 25 million Russians. Yeah. Right, so they were going to roast these guys on a spit.
So did he surrender to the Americans?
I think so, yeah, I think he did. All right. Now, in the 1950s, there's no question, the Soviets were way ahead of us. We had developed the bomb, all right. The Soviets blew one off 4 years later. A little help from American spies, but I think all that did was speed it up a little bit. It's considered kind of a space Pearl Harbor. October 1957, Sputnik. Totally shocked this country. Everybody knows like Pearl Harbor, okay, like, oh my God. I mean, my dad, he still remembers it like yesterday. People today know Sputnik was a shock, but I don't think they realize just how much of a shock. First of all, you could see it. All right, you can see satellites overhead. I see them all the time. They don't look like much, little moving stars. And you could turn on the radio and hear it. All right? And you say, oh my God, we thought those Soviets were so stupid. They just put the first artificial satellite into orbit. That means they've got a rocket powerful enough to do it, and that means they've got an atomic bomb. You can put the bomb on top of that rocket. All right, so it's really frightening. Okay? Those of you in school, like all these young people here, Sputnik was part of what created the advanced placement program, because there was some feeling of, we'd better beef up schooling. We think we're so smart. Look what those guys did. The Soviets put the first living thing into orbit. A dog, Laika, who unfortunately didn't survive it. But the next launches did. They also sent up Belka and Strelka, who did survive it. And they're, I don't know about now, at the time they were technically made heroes of the Soviet Union. The Soviets were the first to reach the moon. They sent basically a Sputnik there and crashed it into it. At a time when you have to understand what a technological achievement that was. It still is, all right? And of course, they sent the first human being into space, Yuri Gagarin, all right? First person to orbit the Earth, okay? So, and again, it doesn't seem like much now compared to what we've done, but at the time, I mean, these were incredible. We thought they were so backward. Well, they weren't. Okay, now, 1958, President Eisenhower created NASA. All right, he wanted a couple of things. First of all, this is an incredible thing for a guy who came out of the military and knew the military. He didn't want space militarized. NASA is, people don't believe this, but NASA is a civilian agency, okay? These early guys all came out of the military. Today, they probably do, but a lot of them don't. They don't have to. It's a civilian agency. And they do some military missions, but in fact, the military prefers to launch their own stuff. We'll get into that. But so it's a civilian agency. And he created it to put it all under one roof, get it out of the military, okay? and have it, you know, we needed our own space program, and our stuff was awful at the time. There's films of the stuff falling over, blowing up on the pad, and it just, you know, just nothing happens. Okay, now, the 1960 election. Eisenhower was the first president that was not eligible for a third term. Okay, so it's an open seat. Kennedy is running against Nixon. It's kind of interesting. All right, everybody liked Ike. Eisenhower probably could have won a third term. Okay, but he was everybody's grandpa. All right, he was the oldest president in history until Ronald Reagan. And if Trump does 2 full terms, he'll be the oldest. Okay. Kennedy ran against the vice president, which was Richard Nixon. Kennedy is the youngest president ever elected. All right. Not the youngest president, but the youngest one ever elected. Teddy Roosevelt became president. But, hello, right? He was younger. Okay. And basically what Kennedy was saying, Eisenhower took this approach. The slow, steady hand. We're not in a race. We don't have to beat him at every punch. All right, Eisenhower's kind of the tortoise, all right, who wins the race in the end. Kennedy ran against Nixon saying, we got to get going again, all right? Nixon had this famous kitchen debate with Khrushchev, all right, where they're in a model American kitchen, okay? And Nixon says to him, you may be ahead in rockets, but we're ahead in color television, right? Kennedy, and I think he might have been wrong, but Kennedy said to Nixon, I'm not that interested in color television, I want rockets, okay? We got to get going. He called it a missile gap. They've got more missiles than us. Okay? When he got into office, he found out there was indeed a missile gap on our side. Oops. Right? Well, let's just forget about that one. All right? So Kennedy wants something. Kennedy was interested in science and exploration and all of that. But his primary is a little bit Trumpian, actually. His primary thing is he wants to win. All right? He wants something where we can win against the Soviets and where we can, impress the world. But he also saw it, and I like this. It was a way to win against the bad guy without blowing everybody to bits. All right? It was peaceful competition. All right? So he tasked Lyndon Johnson, right, who was his vice president, and Johnson was actually the bigger supporter of the space program. Kennedy liked it. He supported it, believed in it, but it was more a political thing for him. All right? Said, Lyndon, go talk to NASA. Get somebody in charge over there that can get things organized. All right, and give me something we can do that's doable, but that'll beat the Soviets. All right, and they come back with land on the moon. Okay? How do we do that? All right. Took a methodical approach. Okay? The first, we did it in 3 stages. Okay? Now, Kennedy has his famous speech. He goes before Congress. All right? We had just been humiliated by the Soviets. All right? They had put a person into orbit, Yuri Gagarin, really photographic, handsome, charismatic guy. Okay, so we got to... And Kennedy had just been humiliated by the Bay of Pigs invasion. Disaster. He goes to Congress and says, I propose that we make it a national goal. We land a man on the moon and return him safely to the Earth in this decade. Yes, sir?
Is that guy Buzz or Neil?
He's not either one of them. But you want to know something? He walked on the moon later. I'll tell you about him in just a minute. Okay? Now, first you had 3 basic things to it. Can we get up there? All right? Can the human body survive in space? We didn't know anything about it. That's Project Mercury. It's a single occupant vehicle. It's small. right? John Glenn said you didn't get in the thing, you put it on, all right? I don't know if any of you have ever seen any of these. They have them in the Smithsonian. We have all of the capsules. All the capsules made it back.
What was the name of the first monkey that went up there?
I think Ham, I think was his name. Yeah, we sent up a monkey before we sent a person. Yeah, a chimp. That was the basic thing. Just, now, this guy here, Al Shepard, he's the first American into space. Yeah, Al Shepard. A suborbital flight, 15 minutes, just up and down, okay? And, all right, here's of this whole presentation, here's the one thing you'll never forget. He's the first guy to pee in a spacesuit, right? They had him, these things, firing these beasts off is not like getting on the train, okay? It doesn't go on a schedule. It goes when it's ready. So he drank about 80 cups of coffee in the morning. Then they put him in the thing. Then he's sitting there for like 6 hours, until they're ready to fire this thing. And he's like, guys? And getting in it wasn't easy. All right, it took, a long time to get in, get strapped in, get the latches off, latch it back in. He's like, guys? And Mercury had no capacity to go to bathroom. All right, the other ones did. Not fun, but they finally just said, go in the suit. All right? Now, John Glenn here, all right? He's the first American to orbit the Earth. Not the first human to do it, but the first American. All right, to the young people here. Okay, let's see how good you are. I bet you know it, but that's John Glenn over here. Who's the guy next to John Glenn? Do you guys know? The young people here. Do you know? Do you know who the guy next to John Glenn is? On the right.
Yeah, first same name is John Glenn.
No, his first name is John. Not John. I'll give you a clue. He was a president. Do you know which one? Yes. Not quite. John F. Kennedy, yeah.
There's a picture right there also on the wall.
Oh, yeah. It's really sad. People don't realize this. Kennedy didn't live to see the moon landings.
He initially didn't want to spend the money to do this.
He was a little bit reluctant, yeah. Yes, sir.
Wasn't Neil were the first guys to land on the moon?
That's true. That's right. And who was the first one? Who was the first one to get out?
I think Buzz.
No, Buzz wanted to, but no. Yeah, people don't really think about it, but it's terribly sad. And Lyndon was the one saying, this is the thing to do. All right, he signed on to it, and he did believe in it, but he was very concerned with the cost. One wonders, had he lived, whether he might have said, look, you don't have to do it by the end of the decade. Just be very careful with that, dear, all right? Or, maybe we don't have to do this, but I'll tell you this, Eisenhower thought it was crazy. Eisenhower favored the space program and started NASA, but he said the moonshot was nuts. That's a quote, nuts. And I sometimes wonder if he wasn't right, because Eisenhower's view was more take the long shot, take the long view. Slow but steady wins the race. And one problem I think NASA has had it since Apollo is kind of aimless, all right? Now maybe they should have a conversation with the Patriots, but one of the conversations at the time was, we already won the Super Bowl, why are we doing the Super Bowl again? All right? I've often wondered what Kennedy would have done. I think with that commitment, he probably would have seen it through to a moon landing. But what would he have done afterwards? I don't know, but it's really sad. He didn't live to see it. But he did live to see the successful completion of Mercury. So when he was killed, he knew it was well on its way. All right? Second thing, this was always my favorite as a kid, was Project Gemini. Does anybody know, all right, to the young people here, what does the word Gemini mean? Well, let's put it this way. If Mercury was a one-person craft and Apollo was a three-person, no! That's the new math.
I know. 5.
No! What's between 1 and 3?
1,000.
Oh my God. This is Elon Musk here. Thank you! 2, all right? This was, when we were kids growing up, this is the one that we just thought was the coolest thing ever. All right? It's a 2-person craft. All right? Now, what they had to do, the main thing was test out all the procedures. Okay? Let's think about it for a minute. You got 2 bodies, all right? The Earth and the Moon. You would tend to think, I mean, we all watched all those bad science fiction movies where something like this lands backward, like Elon Musk, okay? Lands backwards on the moon and then rockets straight back, okay? Well, that's a really bad idea, all right? But I'll tell you this. That was the initial plan, actually. On paper, it looks like it makes sense. Just fire a rocket there, go straight there, land it, bring it back. It took a while. I forget his name, but there was one guy who came up and said, I got a better idea, which is to do it modular. More complicated, but it worked better, and that's ultimately what they decided to do. Okay? And we'll get to that in just a minute. All right? But to do that, one, you got to be able to get outside of the spaceship. What's that like? All right? Oh, is it 0? Look at the guy in the center. Is it 0 gravity up there?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
You're arguing with me?
Almost non-gravity.
You know, that's closer. Let's put it this way. All right, all you smarties out there. All right, I know. I worked in the Ashland school system for 18 years. So you're all in the Ashland schools. It's really good. All right, so you're all really smart. How can I be right? This guy, he's weightless, but it's not 0 gravity. How could that happen?
It's like 10 gravity. It's near the Earth, but not exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's close. What's he doing with relationship to the Earth? What's he doing?
He's fine. Keeps falling.
Very good. It's free fall. All right? So they're weightless, but there's plenty of gravity up there. There's just no resistance. All right? So thank you. That was one thing. How can you work out? Can you step outside of a spacecraft? Can the suits do it? Ed White there, sad story with him. Ed White, he loved it. He refused to get back in. He was out there about 20 minutes. Mission Control said, okay, Ed, time to get back in. He went, nope. What are you going to do about it? He stayed out for a while. All right? The other thing was longer duration. Okay, now let's see. All right, I'm going to ask the old folks here, all right, because the kids know everything. So you old people, all right, how long does it take to get to the moon?
3 days.
All right, somebody saved you. Very good. And then you're going to spend some time there, and then you're going to come back. Okay, so it's minimally like a week. Some of the missions were longer. All right, you know, Apollo 11 is actually the least of the missions, scientifically. It's the historic one, but for science, it wasn't that much, actually. All right, so long duration, what happens? Now we've had, I think the longest somebody has been up there is a year. All right? But at the time, Ed White here, 4 days, that was a record. The longest Gemini flight was 2 weeks. Okay, now, tough one. Orbital mechanics. I hate to tell you this, guys, but all your Star Wars and Star Trek movies are all wrong. All right? I know, it's like really upsetting because I want to live in Star Trek. All right? Orbital mechanics are really difficult. To do what they did, to go the way they went, you had to have 2 spaceships able to meet and connect up together. And in space, it's completely counterintuitive. You have to slow down to speed up to slow down. Nobody even knew if you could do it. And what happens if you run out of gas? Can you go to the gas station up there?
No.
No. All right, you got to watch fuel. All right, now, this stuff was dangerous. Okay? Very risky. Okay, let's see here. Okay, young lady, what's your name? Hi. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good. Can you tell me who the first person to walk on the moon was? John Kennedy. He probably would have liked to, but who do you think? Do you know? Do you know? I know you know. Now, I'm not asking him. I'm asking you. Who's the first person to walk on the moon? No. Neil Armstrong. Give it up for her. Okay, now, why Neil Armstrong? To be honest with you, I don't actually know. I can tell you that NASA crew rotations were always a little weird. They had a plan and it never really got stuck to. But I can tell you one thing, one reason why, one part of it why Neil was chosen was because of what happened to him on Gemini 8. All right? Gemini 6 and 7 rendezvoused. And of course, they launched Gemini 7 first. All right? It's space. Nothing happens like you think it's going to. Gemini 8, the job was to connect it up with another space vehicle, this, called the Agena. All right? Just connect it up, dock, fly around, separate. That takes piloting skills. All right? This is not like flying a Piper Cub. All right? Or you're going 17,000 miles an hour. All right? He connected it up. Everything seemed fine, and then, sorry, young people, but it's true, all hell broke loose. The thing started spinning end over end, like a dozen times a second. You pilot, that'll kill you. All right, because you'll eventually, the inner ear work out. Even experienced pilots like this, it'll eventually black out, and if you black out in space, you're dead. Or if you vomit, or you vomit inside a spacesuit, that is a death sentence. Some of them did vomit in orbit, but they didn't have the helmets on. But doing a maneuver like that, they did it with the suits on. And you'd think, all right, you connect it up, you go out of control. What's the first thing you think?
Disconnect.
Which they did, and it got worse. All right, in other words, they thought the problem was with the Agena. It wasn't, it was with the Gemini spacecraft. The maneuvering jets were stuck open. Okay? So when they disconnected, it actually started going faster. Here's Neil Armstrong. He's like 32 years old. All right, top notch. The guys they were all test pilots, these early guys. You know, people that are insane. Okay? Get into dangerous machines at 1,000,000 miles an hour every day. Right? He finally, while he's spinning around like that, nearly passed out, figured out that it was the reaction control system and just shut the whole thing down. And eventually he was able to reorient the spacecraft, and of course, they brought it back. Now, a question for you. They had to abort the mission and bring it back. Question for you, to anybody. Is that a failed mission?
No.
Why not?
Because they learned something from it.
Yeah, he felt terrible about it. So and then they're going to fly me again.
Because they brought it back.
Yeah, yeah.
If they brought it back, it would have been a failed mission.
Well, of course. But because they said, no, this is going to happen. NASA didn't consider it a failed mission, like Apollo 13. All right, they really didn't consider it that. I still have time. I'm going to go till about 2:30, all right? It's supposed to be 45 minutes, but I told them it'd be a little bit long. They said, no, we consider it successful. This stuff is going to happen. You handled it and brought the mission home, okay? So he was clearly thinking, let's put it this way, the NASA brass clearly was sort of thinking, you know, we're going to get to the moon. Maybe he's the guy to be the, they wanted somebody really cool under pressure. Aldrin wanted to be the first one out, but that disqualified him, all right, because well, NASA didn't want, the guys said this is a team. They didn't want a showboater. A lot of my former students these days don't understand these guys were not in this to make money, all right? They don't get that, okay? They made basic government pay. They got a per diem for going to the moon, all right? That's it, all right? They wanted somebody that was, they didn't want somebody that was going to be on the Wheaties box, all right? Okay, so we mastered all of this. All right, now the next one, of course, was the Apollo. Now we'll take a look at that a bit. All right, let's take a look at this thing, okay? And I will send it around. Okay, people can handle it. One great thing about Lego is you can't break them. You just reassemble them. Obviously, it's 2,000 pieces. Don't drop it. Yes, sir?
And you can also break it and make a new one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in this case, I'd rebuild it, I think. All right? This is the Saturn V rocket, okay? The late 60s, early 70s. It's a 3-occupant vehicle. All right? This is the first rocket ever built designed solely for exploration. All right? Here's an interesting thought. The rockets that Mercury and Gemini used were initially designed to carry nuclear bombs. They never did that, thankfully. It's an interesting swords to plowshares kind of thing. This was never designed for that. It remains the most powerful rocket ever built. All right, the Falcon Heavy is not quite as big and powerful.
Weren't the Soviet ships more powerful? Some of their big
The one they were working on, but it never flew, the N1, but it was a bad design. 30 engines, many times, right? Built for strictly non-military purposes, okay? Enormously reliable once it was certified for flight. It was never a problem with the Saturn V rocket, all right? There are a few that were built and were never flown, and it's on the bucket list here to go and see one of these things. My brother has a conservation company, art conservation, and they refurbished one of them, the one that's in at the Manned Space Center in Houston, which is on display now. But he said it's basically a gigantic gas can with a match at the bottom, right? Light it and run, right? Okay, so 7.5 million pounds of thrust out of the base of this thing. The F1 engines at the bottom. The Soviet one. All right. Say what? Oh, maybe. All right. That's okay. There's something rattling around in there, but I'd have to take the whole thing apart to figure out what it is. The Soviets did build something, but it never really flew, called the N1. Here's the problem with the Soviet one, 30 engines. Well, that's something that's going to go wrong with that. And they didn't have the infrastructure to do the testing regime that we could do. We started building this in the early 60s, all right, and everything was tested, every bit of it. The Soviets actually never really had much interest in going to the moon. They did it because they've been in competition with us. They engaged in it. They never sent a man there. Landed people, yes. The Soviets landed rovers, actually, automated rovers.
I think the Chinese are trying to do that.
The Chinese did it. They did it on the far side.
Did they land a person on the moon? No,
Land people, no.
not just a robot.
Rovers, yeah. They say they want to do it, but I think Elon Musk will probably beat all of us. But I'll get to that at the end of it. Okay. Very reliable piece of equipment. Okay. 3 stages. All right, now, launch to orbit was about 10 minutes. Let's see, if we got a chair, can somebody pull me over a chair? All right. Okay, now let's thank you. Actually, face the audience. There we go, thank you. Okay. This bottom piece is basically just a big gas can. All right, 7.5 million pounds of thrust coming out of this. It's probably about 1 billion gallons a mile. It's got to go from 0 to 17,000 in about 10 minutes. All right? Now, let's see if I can do this. It worked at home. Well, I've done it before, but there we go. Okay. The whole system is use once and throw away. Okay? So these probably, some of them have been recovered. They would drop off, okay, and then either just burn up in the atmosphere or land in the Atlantic Ocean. I know Jeff Bezos recovered one of them, okay? And if you handle it carefully, just send it around to kids who want to take a look at it. Okay. Here's your second stage, okay? This is what got you into orbit, all right? That was another thing they had to figure out. You know, can you build a huge multi-stage rocket? Okay. But same thing. Another few minutes and this is done. This would burn up in the atmosphere. Okay? Let's let the kids take it. Maybe send it back to the back. All right? Okay. This third stage, this is what sent you on your way to the moon. Okay? This had an interesting problem. We'd never done this before. Can you restart a rocket in space? All right. Well, we know now that you can, but they didn't, how do you do that? All right, because those were, there's no off switch. All right. And there's no reverse and no brakes. Okay. You fire that baby, you're going. All right. Astronauts said that it was a pretty smooth ride, and it was so loud you didn't hear it. You felt it. All right? The closest they let anybody get to it is 3 miles. All right, for observation. All right, now, this is the thing that gets you to the moon. All right? The lander is in here. All right, the Lego actually has a lander that fits in there, but I don't have it. This is an escape tower. Okay? So I can't quite do it with the Lego, but this would be ejected after about a minute. Okay? Now, this is the piece that did a really quite incredible thing that we really didn't think about much at the time, called translunar injection. All right? When you're in orbit, you really haven't left the Earth. You're not on the surface, but you're still, it's the Earth's gravity. All right. 17,000 miles an hour in orbit. How fast do you think you have to go to break orbit?
So how fast are you going to line up with the orbit?
Well, when you're in orbit, you're going 17,000 miles an hour. But how fast to break orbit?
I'm guessing 17 million.
No, not quite that fast. Yeah.
17,001.
No. 25,000 miles an hour this thing has to get you going to. All right? It's the fastest. It remains the fastest that any human being has ever traveled. 25,000 miles an hour. All right? Called translunar injection. You have to do it at exactly the right point. Okay? If you don't do it at the right point, you're either going to crash into the moon, which is no fun, or you're going to miss it, which might be more fun. All right? Okay. Now, the lunar lander's in here. Okay? All folded up. So after you get going 25 to the young ones, all right, my fan club up here. After you get going 25,000 miles an hour, what do you think is the next thing you have to do?
Panic.
They were probably doing that the whole way. Yes, sir.
You have to have enough fuel to actually get you.
Well, they have that, but they were very, very worried about fuel. Okay? All right? But the lander's in there. Okay? And once this thing has got you going 25,000 miles an hour, you don't need it. All right? So what's the next thing you have to do?
Panic. So it's that you have to find a way to drop that without the lander going with it.
Exactly. They had to separate the ship, okay? Which I can sort of do here. All right?
Glenn, were those just like explosive bolts or just they released it? How did they?
I think it's, I'm not sure, I think it's explosive bolts. All right, I'm not that good on the real details there, but they had to separate the ship, okay, which probably was not made from Legos, but all right. Imagine that's the lunar lander. Imagine that's right here, all right? And these top things wouldn't have been on it. Separate the ship, turn it around, dock with the lander, pull it out, all right, and then turn it around again, all right, and head towards the moon, okay? Let's see, let's start this one over there, all right? This is what actually goes to the moon, all right? All that's gone within a few hours, all right? This is what actually goes to the moon. Yeah, I'm definitely going to go more than 45 minutes, but that's okay, right? Right.
We're here till 4.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to go till 4. But,
Is there going to be a video too?
yes, there's tons of videos. Yeah. All right. Yes, sir.
You can, and one landing you use one landing on the moon you use this thing.
I'm going to show you that in just a minute. So this with the lander went to the moon. Of the whole thing, the only thing that made it back, and we have all of them, was this. Yeah, that's it, the crew compartment. All right. So imagine spending,
Ginormous.
you know what was the, the whole stack, all right, the rocket, everything's almost 400 feet tall, all right? Want to know what the worst job in the whole space program was? One of these things has been in outer space for 2 weeks with 3 guys in it who haven't had a shower in 2 weeks. The Navy divers that had to open the door after they got them, right? The smell, right? Well, let's start with you. You can. Now, what do you think? Do you think it was fun to ride that thing?
Yeah.
You think it was safe?
No.
No, it wasn't safe.
It seemed panicky.
Well, what the astronauts said about it is you didn't have any time to think about it. Their heart rates went up, okay? It was dangerous, and we did lose people. All right, this was terrible tragedy, all right? Apollo 1, January 27th, 1967, is what was called a plugs out ground test. It means it was a full test short of launching the thing. And they disconnected the electrical cables to test the spacecraft's internal wiring and stuff. The Apollo spacecraft at the time was a mess. All right, the design was bad. You got to line up the latches there. Just be careful with it. The workmanship was bad. The communications were bad. Something sparked an electrical fire. All right, to this day, we have the capsule. To this day, they don't know exactly what. They found things like faulty wiring. They found things like somebody had left a wrench in there, and the guys burned to death. All right. Gus Grissom, who flew on Mercury. Ed White, the first American to walk in space. All right, the guy whose picture I showed you. And Roger Chaffee, a young kid, he's like 30 years old. All right. And NASA at the time said it was instantaneous. It wasn't instantaneous. It took them about 30 to 60 seconds to die, so they knew what was happening to them. All right, now here's a question for any of you. On a spacecraft, why would you design a hatch that opened inward? It does make some sense. What is it?
If it opens outward, then if it hits something, you're not gonna be able to close it. If it goes inward, you can close it from the inside out. But if it goes out, you may not be able to have enough force to bring it back in.
Good guess, but no, yeah?
It holds the door shut.
Yeah. It's not as stupid as it sounds to design an inward opening hatch. Out in space, it makes perfect sense. The force of the air keeps the hatch sealed. But they didn't anticipate this. Now, all right, let's throw in something else. They had a pure oxygen atmosphere, all right, at 16 pounds per square inch. The air you're in now, does anybody know what PSI it is? Pounds per square inch. Anybody know?
14.
Is that what you're going to say?
No, I was going to 400.
No, it's about 14. They had this. Are we breathing pure oxygen now? No, it's oxygen and nitrogen. There are reasons why, and I don't know what they are offhand, but they had it pure oxygen at 16 psi. What's going to happen to a spark in that? Boom. And they can't get the hatch open. There are recordings, I won't play them, if you're curious. There are recordings of the radio communications. They didn't die instantaneously, but they're pretty hair-raising.
If you have 16 psi inside the capsule, it's forcing the door closed,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
So if you have 16 pounds and you try to close it, you pushing against that pressure trying to close it, it's nearly impossible.
They know from the way they found the bodies that the astronauts tried to get that hatch open, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't open it. It was heavily redesigned after this. And again, I don't know the reasons. They kept it at 16 psi pure oxygen, but they designed an outward opening hatch that could open instantaneously. All right. Obvious. It was terrible. The older ones, any of you guys remember this? Horrifying. It was horrifying, right? Okay, now.
That was the second fatality. Right? There was 2.
Well, it was the only one in a spacecraft.
Well, the first one, the second one was when they took off and those people died.
Oh, that's the Russians.
No, the Americans. They had this later on.
Oh, later on, yeah. Yeah, the Challenger. Yeah. All right. 2 through 6, and again, their numbering is always a little weird. Were unmanned test flights. All right, Apollo 7 was a manned Earth orbital test flight in a redesigned capsule. All right. Apollo 8 is really the breakthrough one. All right. It's the first time we sent people to the moon. There was no lander because it was just an orbital flight. Okay, so they didn't need the lander. It's the first time that human eyes directly saw the far side of the moon. All right, again, it's not the dark side, it's the far side. All right. The Earthrise photo. Yes, sir.
When was the moon discovered?
Probably the first time the first human being looked up in the sky. No, it's a good question. When was the moon discovered? All right, do you know how old the moon is?
1,300.
Oh, keep going.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yes, sir.
I was like 1,000 billion.
Not quite that much. It's about 4.5 billion years old. You want to know what? One of the moon landers found what they called the Genesis rock, a rock that's 4.5 billion years old, undisturbed. All right? A real view back in time. All right, now, I assume most of you guys have seen this photo. All right? Earthrise. It's the first time I'd ever seen it. You want to know, that's not the photo. That's the photo. All right? Think about it. I remember this. I remember Life magazine printed this photo and looking at it going, that, like, what that, you know, that doesn't make sense. Ground is underneath you. Not in space. Okay? The craft is coming around like this, and it was a completely accidental photo. All right? They didn't know it's not digital. No digital. It's film camera. They didn't even know they had it until they brought it back and developed it. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but all those guys, it was fake, it was fake, it was fake. They all look at the space stuff, look at the video stuff. We had the technology to go to the moon. We didn't have the technology to fake it. All right? The video technology wasn't there. All right? None of that. None of it. Okay? So, of course, yeah, the ground is not, there's no up and down in space. Okay? So the ground's here, and you're coming around like this. It was so disorienting to so many people. NASA rotated the photo, and that's the one that people are used to. But in fact, that's the actual photo. All right, now, one of the things Apollo 8 did, they went at Christmas time, Christmas 1968, and they read from Genesis. NASA got sued over this. All right, separation of church and state. Fortunately, the judge basically just said, you're an idiot and get out of here, right? Okay? I should have sound here, but yep, crappy old black and white live television broadcast. They had film cameras with them and television cameras. There's no video cameras, right? Yeah.
The rocket equation, it's a beautiful thing. No astronaut launches through space.
Shut up. There a volume control? Yeah, there we go. Allow once, yes. So you're in the command module looking out the windows. Go ahead. It's all right. Move it. Yeah. I think the early flights had black and white cameras, television cameras, and the later ones had color, I think. Of course, the moon kind of is black and white. Okay, so the first live television broadcast from the moon. All right, reading, I think entirely, I'm Jewish, and I think it's entirely appropriate. Okay. All right, 9 and 10, dress rehearsals. Okay. First Earth orbital test of the lunar excursion module. Okay, let's take a look at this thing for a minute. All right. How does this, okay, to my fan club up here. How does this, don't get so excited, young man. All right, hold on. All right, I'll let you handle it. Okay, but just give me a minute. How does this differ from an airplane?
Because they build it different.
Okay, but why would they build it differently?
So airplanes, they're meant to fly in the atmosphere.
Okay.
And in space, the air is too thin. Is it thick or thin?
Thin.
It's too thin for planes to fly. So they had to, and it's literally flying and it's literally inside a huge rocket, trying to not
Okay.
trying to not fall with something that's going to literally explode.
Well, it could explode, yeah. Young man, did you have a question?
What?
Did you have a question?
I'm just lucky.
Okay.
And
Yes, dear. But hold on, there's other people. Yeah, go ahead, dear.
So it could land on the moon because if it was an airplane, then it wouldn't actually be able to.
Yeah. At the time, and I think it's still true, it's the only flight vehicle ever designed that never had to work in an atmosphere. It's entirely a creature of space. Yes, sir.
Since we're talking about space, then my dad and I watched a video of the eagle.
Mm-hmm. That's this one, yeah.
All 13 minutes of it.
Yeah, well, we're going to see some of it now, but you're gonna learn a little more about it.
All the way until they said the eagle had landed.
Okay, well, we're going to go beyond that. All right. The naming of the ships was up to the crew. I do know that the Tranquility Base was apparently unplanned. I'm not even sure that Neil Armstrong planned it. And none of the others that landed, it landed in the Sea of Tranquility. None of the others that landed other places had a base of any kind. I'm not sure the history of it, but they did do some off-the-books kind of things, right? Buzz Aldrin took communion on the moon, right? Which I don't know if you guys knew that, but all right, now, test it out in Earth orbit, all right? Apollo 10, this had to be the most frustrating flight of all of them. It's a full dress rehearsal. Go all the way down to the moon, out to the moon, take the lander down to within 60,000 feet, all right, and then, whoops, sorry, no, got to come back, okay? And they actually shorted the fuel, okay? Now, why would you think they would do that?
They were afraid the astronauts might decide to go ahead and do it anyway.
That's what everybody thinks, but in fact, it's not very likely, okay? These were military test pilot guys. You would have been busted. Yes, sir?
I think what you think about, like, that.
What do I think of it? I think it's really cool. I want one, but the wife over there won't let me have one. Okay? All right, now, I'm going to, it separates, okay? Once you landed on the moon, you didn't need this. You leave it there, okay? This comes back and then reconnects with the command module. Rocks first, get the rocks out. We've got plenty of people, okay, but the rocks, okay? Rocks first and then the people, and then eject it, all right? Most of them crashed back on the moon. That was part of the science. They had seismology detectors on the moon. So the crash was used to measure, basically, the moon's vibration from the crash. Okay? Now, I'm going to send this around so you can look at it. Just be a little careful. There's moving parts and whatnot. But like I said, you can't break a Lego. Okay? Well, you're not that interested. Okay? There you go. Right? Just pass it around. Okay? Just be a little bit careful with it. Okay, now, the big one. Oh, why short the fuel? because they wanted, for the ascent engine, they wanted a realistic recreation. It wouldn't have a full fuel tank coming back up. Okay? So they wanted it, and the moon's gravity is weird. It's different from Earth. All right, so they wanted a realistic recreation of it. Okay? All right, now the big one here. Okay? It was billed at Apollo 11. All right? It was billed as the first lunar landing attempt. All right, the astronauts themselves gave it about 30, 30, 30. 30% it would all go as it, or 33% it would all go as it did. 33% that something would screw up, but they'd get back alive. And 33% that they would all die out there. President Nixon did prepare a speech if they died. It is in the national, it's at the Nixon Library. You can find it online. He did have a speech prepared. All right? Armstrong, I'll show you this. Armstrong ended up having to land it manually. Can I see this for a second, guys? All right? All right. They're in the whole thing. Right? The crew compartment's up top there. Okay? I don't know if they've seen it in the back yet, but the computer, all right, oh, first of all, these little things you're carrying around in your pockets, you can thank the space program for them. All right, because the roots of small computers this is a computer, it's not a phone, right? Were developed for this, okay? The computer controlled this, all right, the descent engine. And it's a very, can you do me a favor? Mm-hmm. Can you come up and just pick up the moon globe and bring it over here? Okay, bring it over here. Okay, just hold it for me. Okay? It's a very complicated dance because what you've got is the moon's gravity pulling it down. Okay? And that wants to speed up. And this thing's slowing it down. Hold it still. Okay? So what's happening is it's going around like this. All right? It's like in a big parabola. All right? And it very gradually slows it down until it just drops. So the computer controlled this. Okay? Thank you. You can put it down now. Okay? People say, why isn't there a blast crater underneath the thing? Let's see. How many of you, when you want to stop a car, you floor the gas pedal? Yeah. All right? Your mom here? Your dad here? Don't ever get in my car. The reason why, first of all, the moon's surface is hard. Second of all, they shut the engine off before it landed. You'll hear that. The engine could throttle. All right? The computer is throttling it down. All right? It's a balance between the moon's gravity. They're stepping on the brakes, basically. It's a balance between the moon's gravity, all right, and the thrust. All right? And they actually shut it off and dropped the last few feet. Okay? Not to mention the moon's surface is relatively hard.
It's also very dusty, a lot of dust, so they had an engine, all that dust would come.
Yes, they were worried about the dust. I'll talk about the dust. It's a little weird. The lander, the setup of the lunar module is what determined who got out first. It's small and uncomfortable and noisy, and nobody slept very well, I'll tell you that. Okay? But the doors here, all right, I never understood this. Neil Armstrong's the commander, but he was controlling, he could control it, all right, the computer's controlling it like this, but he could control it this way, all right? And the computer was overloading and was aiming them towards a boulder field, all right? So he flies it manually with he lands it with like 20 seconds of fuel left. Yeah, you want to talk about guts, okay? So he was the Aldrin was the pilot, but he actually wasn't flying the thing. I don't understand it, but the point is, it was really determined by the setup. The doors here, Armstrong's there, Aldrin's. There's no seats in the thing, by the way. Seats were gone. Okay, all right. It stood the whole time, and it was so small that Neil's got to get out first. All right, because of that. All right, now. What you're hearing, first of all, you hear a couple of things. All right, the 1201 program alarms, and 1202. These things had nowhere near the memory of a modern computer. They didn't need it. There's no multitasking. There's no email. There's no audio. There's no internet. All it has to do is a lot of calculations and on-off commands. It doesn't need a lot of memory. All right? But the landing, one of the radars was on. Later flights, they shut it off. And the alarms are just saying, I'm getting more information than I can handle, so I'm forgetting about some stuff. All right? But it's aiming him towards a boulder field, so he takes over and flies it manually. You hear this countdown. If they hit 0 seconds, he has to abort, or you're going down. That's happened, but you ain't coming back up. All right? Now, what you'll hear is contact light. They have not landed on the moon at that point. All right? Everybody thinks they have. The landers had prongs coming out of the legs. All right? Contact light means the prongs have the prongs are 3 or 4 feet long. The prongs have touched. A light has come on in the dashboard. And you know what that says? Shut the engine off. All right? Contact light, okay, engine stop. Eagle, we copy you down. And the prongs just collapsed. All right, and it was because they were worried about the dust kicking back up into the engine. All right? So I'll show you that little clip. They were measuring his heart rates. His heart rate went up to about 140 doing that. But it's okay. All right, so here's the landing. Sorry, guys, I'm going to keep you for a while, but what the heck.
Eagle, Houston, we see you on a Sarah over. Eagle, first up.
So you're inside the lunar. All right, they flip perspective there. You see the prongs? All right. That's taken from the command module. And he's turning it around, basically. I think about 60,000 feet when they separate. But I'm not totally sure. It's funny to look at, all these young guys in white shirts. They're all like 25. All right, here we go.
You're looking great. How you doing, Control? We're looking good here. I know what you're talking about. Go, guys, you have to go. I don't go. 2,000 feet, 2,000 feet. Into the ag, 47 degrees. Rocket. 47 degrees. Still looking very good. Here go. Alarm. Alarm.
That's the alarm. Nobody knew what it was.
Okay, we're go. Where to go? Thanks, high. Where to go? Altitude 1,600. Eagle looking great. Roger, 1202, we copy it.
Same alarm. It's an overload alarm.
50, up and down to 23. 540 feet at a 15. 350 feet down at 4. Altitude, velocity light. 8.5 down, 220 feet. Forward, come down nicely, 200 feet. 4.5 down, 5.5 down. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 75 feet, that's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. Forward. Forward. 20 feet down, 2.5. Pick up some dust. Make shadows. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds forward. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle.
Yeah, yeah. Give the guy a round of applause. Yeah, right? Okay, now, And they estimated he had about 20 seconds worth of fuel left. There's no gas stations there. So at that point, you're staying there, which is actually what I think they would have done. Go down and stay there, but or you got to abort and come back. All right. Now, when he steps out, okay, of course the people say, how could they get a film of the first guy stepping out? It must have been, there was a camera on the leg, okay, that they could control, you know, from the inside, all right? But there's a lot of controversy about what did he actually say, all right?
With 25 million rooms.
NASA has gone back and cleaned up some of the film. So this is a little sharper looking than you saw on TV, but. And this is quite choreographed. All right, he did this carefully on purpose for reasons. There you go, down. So he gets off this very carefully. They were worried about would the astronauts slip, or if they had to leave immediately, could he get back up? No, no. So this is it. Neil Armstrong died a few years ago. He always maintained that he said one small step for a man, right? But because you can't hear it, and that's how it makes sense. One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. You can't hear it in the recording, but he always maintained that he said it. And I've read some analysis of this. He's from Ohio. Apparently, an Ohio accent, they do tend to swallow their A's, right? So it might have said one small step for a man, something like that. Yeah. And I did hear something about like a modern, audio analysis, all right, computerized analysis did hear it, but it's like garbled in transmission. I don't think we'll ever really know. I don't blame the guy. All right, you just stepped out onto the moon. Okay, you might slip up a little bit. It is, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the landers. The Smithsonian has one. It's actually no small step. It's about 3 feet. But of course, it's in 1/6 gravity. But what they didn't know was, could people stand? All right? Our balance is based on Earth gravity. This is 1/6 gravity, but they've got the same mass. And that life support system weighed like 300 pounds on Earth. It doesn't weigh 300 pounds on the moon, but it's got the same mass. So they had to think, that's why he goes down so carefully. I don't want to fall over, because that was a whole nother possibility. If something happens where I have to leave immediately, can I get back on and get back up? All right, which of course, yes, sir. You can tell what? Yeah, yeah. Some, all right? Not so much big ones, okay? Because that's pretty much done. But they were concerned about what they called micrometeoroids, all right? Impacts by small ones, okay? You know where that was really a problem was the space shuttle. You go look at the space shuttles, they're all pockmarked, all right? Because they were hit by small asteroids. Neil Armstrong died a few years ago. Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins are still alive, of course. Collins is the guy that had the experience of staying alone in the command module. When he's on the other side of the moon, he's cut off from literally everything. Literally, all right? And what he said was you looked out one side of the spaceship and you saw this dark, ghostly moon. And the other side, out into infinity. What an experience that must have been. Nixon did call the moon. I'm going to move this thing along a little bit and skip that. But okay, some of the photographs. All right, first of all, there's comparatively little photos of Neil Armstrong on the moon. All right, so that one in the upper left, people say, how could they get this photo of Neil Armstrong if he was the first guy on the moon? What's the answer to the question?
Second guy?
Yeah, it's not Neil Armstrong. Okay, it's Buzz Aldrin. All right? Same thing with the one just to the right of it. That's a photo of Buzz Aldrin. It's one of the few photos of Neil Armstrong. He's in the visor. All right, he's the reflects right back there. Yes. All right. That's the plaque that was left. Signed by the 3 astronauts and President Nixon. There was some feeling about that because Nixon and Kennedy were kind of frenemies a little bit, right? And Nixon canceled the program. He thought it was sort of a Kennedy kind of thing. I think there was some talk of trying to get John Kennedy's signature onto that, but well, Nixon was the president. He was when it was, so they did him. That's a wonderful photograph. The American flag, all right, Apollo 11 taking off. That's like a heat plume coming out of it, like steam. That one in the center with the shadow, I love bringing that up. People say, it must have been fake, look at the shadows. It's nonsense, yes?
The words first step for man
Yeah.
and exactly for man. Was that ad-libbed or was that something?
He had thought about it. It's from Neil Armstrong.
Okay, so it's
Yeah, but he had thought about it, but it was his. It didn't come from NASA or anything like that. I don't know where he got it from, but it's his. As is, I think, Tranquility Base, right? Because none of the other landers did that. Now the one with the shadow, I believe that was taken by Neil Armstrong. All right, he did walk away. These guys stayed next to that lander. All right, they didn't go very far. Okay, they set the flag up too close. It knocked over when it took off. There's some rumor that maybe his daughter died. And there's some rumor that maybe he put a memento of his daughter in the crater that he had walked over. I don't know. He has personal mementos that haven't been released yet. So maybe we'll find out about that. But the shadows, people say, well, It must have been filmed on a stage because the shadows are at angles. People don't know anything about shadows. First of all, there are at least 3 light sources. There's the sun, the Earth, which is 10 times as bright as the moon, and the lunar surface is bright. Second of all, just go look at shadows. They go all over the place, all right? And it's bumpy and everything, all right? That is not Neil Armstrong's footprint. It's Buzz Aldrin's footprint, okay? And it was done for scientific reasons. They wanted to test the consistency of the, it's not soil. I don't know what to call it. It's not really dust either. It's more like, it's almost closer to grains of sand on the beach. It's like glass silicates. They were worried about, particularly the astronauts breathing it. People say, all right, this is a new one that comes out. It must have been fake. Why is that boot print wider than the boot? Okay. Anybody care to take a guess at the answer? No, it's not the angle. It actually was wider. If they're worried about the guy slipping, which some of them did, what's the answer? They had overshoes on. All right, they were worried about them slipping. All right, so they had big rubber with those treads, all right, big rubber overshoes on. And the treads were for a purpose. So you get grip, but also they wanted to get everything was science. They wanted to get the consistency of it. All right, I'll try to move this along, but it's a little much for the, oh, you gotta love this one. The guys just came back from the moon and they still made them go through customs. All right? I'm not kidding. Buzz Aldrin wanted to get his per diem, which means they had to declare this is real, right? Honolulu, they just splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. I love this, right? Cargo, moon rock. It's like, hey, all right, yeah, I'm not going to end that one, all right? I'll go through these quickly. Apollo 12, one of my favorite missions. The main purpose was pinpoint landing techniques, all right, which they did. The mission was to land near an earlier spacecraft, the Surveyor, all right? They got a piece of equipment off the Surveyor. They pulled the TV camera off and brought it back. They wanted to inspect what happens to stuff sitting out on the moon's surface, okay, for that long. Now, perspective. The astronauts always said perspective was always weird. There's no air. So when you're looking in the distance, there's no hazing from distance. And the horizon is much closer. Now, so the lander there is about 600 feet away, okay? Just to give you some perspective. But this was pinpoint landing. That's Pete Conrad. He's the 3rd man on the moon. There's you want a trivia question for a party? There's a great one, all right? This thing was hit by lightning twice on takeoff. The Saturn V rocket, on liftoff, it was hit by lightning twice, right? And they accidentally pointed the TV camera at the sun, which burnt it out. This was like the Joe Sixpack guys. It was perfect after Neil Armstrong, you know, the hero, the guy for all time. This was like having Joe the mechanic go, right? But it was a great flight, though, right? Now, 13, the movie's pretty accurate, actually. Apollo 13, right? What happened was a fuel cell exploded, okay? I don't know the chemistry of it. The fuel cells had liquid chemicals that powered the batteries, okay? They had to stir the chemicals every once in a while, okay? When they stirred it, there was some kind of electrical short and it exploded. That's what it did, okay? Before they came back, they got a photograph of the service module. So they ended up using the lunar module as a lifeboat, all right, to get back. Commander Jim Lovell, he's still alive, all right, he's like 91 or something. He's the only person to fly to the moon twice but never walk on the surface. They did offer him another flight, but his wife was like, you ain't going back up there. No, you got kids, buddy, all right? And again, they kind of regarded it as a successful failure. This stuff is going to happen. They brought him back alive, all right? Just to wrap this up, okay? Apollo 14 was the first of the heavy science missions, okay? it did what 13 was supposed to do. These guys did break the rules every now and again. Al Shepard played golf on the moon. He had an experiment that you could put together as a little bit like a golf club. So he snuck on board 2 golf balls, and here you go. And he could do it. He was an American hero, the first American in space. So
Was the ball top flight?
I don't know, right?
The kilo has never been used, is that correct?
See, I think they had color cameras by this time. Oh, stuff that happened that wasn't supposed to. Apollo 12, everything, Pete Conrad's flight, everything was in manuals, books, paper. The manual for the lunar module, they opened it up and somebody had put a Playboy model in there. Right? I won't show you that picture, but that wasn't supposed to happen, okay?
Was that a picture of E.T.?
No, it was. I don't know who it was, but. I know I'm going long, guys, but I'll finish before 3:30. You hear, what the heck? I don't think they know how far it went. Okay, just a couple more. Let me get you through it. What the heck? All right. 15 was the first to bring a rover. All right, now, a couple of things. People say, it must have been fake. How could you get that rover there? It folded up. All right, that's how they did it. That is storage compartment. All right. In fact, it'll actually do it on this thing. They'll open up, but the thing folded up. That was quite a feat. Design a car that folds up. The wheels folded underneath. The Smithsonian has one, all right, a training one on display. They put it in there, all right, and then you see these things. You've got the rover sitting in front of the lander. People say, must be fake. Where's the rover tracks? They had just unloaded it, you dwarf. Right? They had a kind of pulley system that pulled it out and dropped it on the ground. It was just sitting there. All right, and all right, one thing you cannot fake on Earth, what they call the rooster tails. It didn't have rubber tires. It had like metal slats because they were worried about traction in the dust. All right, it's not Earth. So those metal slats would kick up the dust into what are called rooster tails. That can only happen in a vacuum in 1/6 gravity. Yes, sir.
And there's also a car called a moon buggy.
Yeah, I'm going to show it to you.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Why they have big wheels is because that they don't want to sink down into the deep dust.
Yeah, and with the way it kicks the dust up. All right, now I got a question for you. What's this? What is this?
A computer.
All right, a phone. It's a computer. What's this? A piece of paper. Okay. Feel that. Take it, feel that. All right, feel how much it weighs? Feel that. Okay, which one weighs more? Which one's heavier? That is. Okay, so which one's going to hit the ground first? when I let it go?
I think it's the paper.
Who's your science teacher? That's okay.
I have a science teacher named Mr. Perkins.
Okay. Which one's going to hit the ground first? What if they both hit the ground at the same time? That's what, that's what Galileo said, yeah?
The phone.
Okay. Is it possible they'll both hit the ground at the same time? No, they're not going to, but I'll tell you what. Galileo said falling objects in a gravity field fall at the same speed. And he's right. He said it doesn't matter how much they weigh. They'll fall at the same speed. Now, let's see if he's right. Which one do you think is going to hit the ground first?
Both of them?
Okay. All right, the phone hit first. Could Galileo said they're going to hit at the same time. Could he possibly be wrong?
No, he's
Yes.
right.
So,
Air resistance.
the air resistance. They performed that test on the moon, hammer and a feather. And there was some discussion, what if they don't hit at the same time? Right? So they said, well, we have to go back and reevaluate, use the scientific method, find out what we got wrong. But you'll see, they do hit at the same time. And you cannot possibly fake this on Earth. It's impossible. Okay? Oh, look at how they move and how they stand. Buzz Aldrin, he figured out it's easiest to stand at an angle to balance off that thing in the back and actually to do a bunny hop. He's got a hammer in one hand and a feather in the other. You'll see they hit at the same time. Yeah? No, Neil's back home at this point. So as counterintuitive as it seems, he was right. Okay. Oh, this, I believe it's this here. That's the Genesis rock. 15 is the one that found it. A rock 4.5 billion years old. All right.
How do they know that?
I think they use carbon dating.
They can't because on Earth it can't because organism will decay.
Oh, they have the decay rate.
There's no organism in it.
Yeah. I don't know. Be honest with you.
Radioactive elements, and they can measure through the radioactive elements, and there's nothing in the rocks that would indicate that.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the surroundings. That's a good question. I'm kind of curious by the thing next to it. This is like a thing you'd find in a hardware store for paint colors. They brought that stuff and photographed it because one of the questions was what color is the moon? Right? And they used it for that as like a measuring thing. All right, I'll wrap this up kind of quickly, but it's a little much for the young people. All right? Number 16. Well, falling over was actually no joke. All right? Yeah. Because first of all, could they get back up? Okay. Uh-huh. Remember, your center of gravity is all different and everything. And also, do you send the second astronaut over to help them? What if the second one falls over? Okay, then you've really got it. They were doing the Lunar Olympics. I think this was kind of fooling around. They were seeing how high they could jump.
We got everything out of there to get, okay? Okay, sounds good. We think so too.
Friday,
I'll wrap this up in a few minutes. I know it's going longer than it's supposed to. Oh, the names, I don't know. I think it's John Young. John Young and Charlie something. I don't remember. But look at this. You can't jump that high on Earth. Whoops, over he goes. Bonk, down. I'm not sure that was planned. All right, you can see him here. That's John Young. I don't know how much you can see it, but he's like 3 feet off the surface. All right? I mean, with what on Earth would weigh 300 pounds. Okay? All right, the last one, Apollo 17. Oh, this picture. The blue marble. What do you notice about it?
It's Earth.
It's Earth? What else?
That it's white and green and blue.
Okay, it is. Is it right side up?
I think.
No. By our perspective, it's upside down. All right? The guy took the photograph on the way out. They're floating around the spaceship. Okay, there's no up and down in space. All right? So that's the first time we'd ever seen the full Earth from space. All right, that's the first time. But, you know, you're just floating around. There's no up or down. Okay? So that's the photograph as it was actually taken. That's Saudi Arabia on the bottom. All right? The South Pole is up top there. All right? Yeah. Well, somebody, as the astronaut said, somebody's upside down. NASA usually rotates the photo. Okay? But that's how it was actually taken. Now, it's the only nighttime Saturn V launch, something I would love to have seen. Okay? Gene Cernan is the last man on the moon. All right, he died a couple of years ago. Harrison Schmitt was the only scientist ever sent, a geologist. He's still alive. All right, served as a senator for a while. Was the only complete video that we got of a lunar liftoff. The rover had a camera on it. Okay? And this was actually quite a trick. They wanted to get films of the lunar liftoff. But the problem, you had to use the rover camera for that. But you had to remotely control it from Earth with like a 3-second time lag. Okay? No computers at the time could do it. A guy had to do it. Right? And he finally did it on this last one. And people go, it must be fake. Why are there no flames coming out of the bottom? All right? Hypergolic fuels. Fuels that ignite on contact. All right? You don't need to light them. Plus the fact that there's no air. Okay? Nothing burns. Okay? And then I'll wrap this up. You've been very patient, but I can see, I know it's a little much for the young ones, but, oh, for God's sake.
Where others see destruction, we see hope. Together.
So the camera is on the rover.
50 seconds. That's John Garrett. Let's break down here. Correct. Okay. I'm not going to be able to scrub him out anymore. Okay? All right, now move it. If you lock clear, America, this is Challenger. We're coming up on 210 from liftoff. We'll be with you shortly. Okay, Jack, double check your lightning power breaker. Check. Okay, vector arm is on. I've got 2 good lights. Say mine. I've got 400 plus 1 in. Okay. I'll watch it reset. final look at the valley as far
So
as
the, the guy back in mission control kind of had to send the commands to move the camera sort of a little bit before, all right, it actually occurred. He had to keep that time delay. Fortunately, it's kind of a wide field camera, but. Oh, and if that engine doesn't fire, hope you like the moon. No rescue. Not possible. Couldn't do a thing. Yeah. Maybe they could try and repair it, maybe. But, yeah. And the command module pilot was to come home by himself, which they say they would have done. Here you go. You see? And the guy back in mission control is sweating bullets. Yeah, he's like, where the hell is the thing, right? Anyway, and then the, there it is. The camera kept running for hours. And let me tell you, the moon is really boring. I mean, it just pointed at the lander. That was just nothing happens there. Anyway, just to wrap it all up, the initial plan was to go to Apollo 20. All right, Nixon canceled 18, 19, and 20. There was just no more support for it. It was expensive. The Vietnam War was going on, Watergate. The public was never all that crazy about this. It had like 50% support. They did have something called Apollo applications, which never got off the ground, literally, but was plans for more permanent lunar base, maybe even trips to Venus or Mars. We had some hardware that was built that we did use, Skylab, which took part of the Saturn V and turned it into a laboratory. So they would fly an Apollo module up, and I think they stayed for 3 or 4 months. There were 2 or 3 missions. There was Apollo-Soyuz link-up. Kennedy at one point proposed going to the moon with the Russians. The Russians initially turned it down. Then they accepted it, but Kennedy got killed, and Johnson never picked it up. All right, but we did do a link-up mission. And of course, we now have the International Space Station. The Space Shuttle, the ISS, the International Space Station, you can see it with the naked eye. It goes over frequently, right? It's very bright. The Hubble telescope, and of course the robotic probes and landers, right, which are really incredible, right? And of course, oh, the photographs, all right? It must have been fake. Why can't you see it from Earth? Because it's too small, all right? The biggest things are that lander, all right, which is only like 15 feet across. Even the Hubble telescope can't resolve it, okay? But the landing sites have been photographed from lunar orbit. That's some of them. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, all right? Only about 50,000 feet above. Even with those things, it was really hard to find them because they didn't know exactly, no GPS. They didn't know exactly where they were. And of course, the nuts just say, well, this stuff is fake also, but you know, whatever on that. Space junk is a problem. It may get to the point where we can't get out of Earth orbit because there's just too much junk up there. There's one guy that's looking into like a space vacuum cleaner, basically. Just go vacuum it up.
Doesn't it decay and fall back to Earth, I think?
Some of it does. Some of it is up in orbits where it can't, or there's just so much of it. You guys ever see the movie Gravity?
Yeah.
All right. That scenario is possible, where somebody blows up a satellite, and the junk from it just comes around and tears apart something else. All right, it's actually possible. Okay, so that's an issue. Privatization, I don't know. All right. Elon Musk, I love him. I don't know. On the other hand, do you want a Nike swoosh on the moon? Yes.
I've comment about
Yeah.
that, if I may.
Sure.
There's a mission to Mars that's been planned. They've taken recruits, and, so I know I work at Mass Bay.
Yes.
And one of the recruits is from Mass Bay, who, it's a one-way mission.
Yes,
to go to
yeah,
Mars,
go
come
and
back,
stay,
come
yeah.
back. And she's one of 100 that qualified. I don't know how many they're gonna take, 20, 30, but she's married, she's decided to leave her husband at home. She's gonna take a one-way ticket to Mars and live on Mars, not come back.
I proposed this to my mom when she was 85. Mom didn't think it was such a great idea. I don't.
Just one other comment I wanted to make. Because of the NASA mission, we said, what the hell do we do this for? Well, those missions fueled our economy for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Cell phones, computers, everything.
Oh, absolutely.
It fueled, our economy would not exist now if it wasn't for the NASA space.
Yeah, there's a job. 400,000 people work for NASA. The money was spent on Earth.
So even besides them,
Yeah.
our world economy.
Since then,
our
sure.
world economy,
Sure.
everything from any type of electronic gadgets and stuff is due because of the research they did in the NASA project, because the engineers and scientists.
Hold on
worked
for one
that.
second. What the?
I have a bulletin board of the 20 things we wouldn't have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, I want to wrap this up. Trump gets laughed at for his Space Force, but it's actually not such a bad idea. He's not a good spokesman for it. But if you look at the actual proposals, it's more like a Coast Guard. We have no capacity for rescue up there. And if a permanent, there are people, I met a guy who spent a year on the space station. Maybe we need something, or particularly if companies are going up there. I think Elon Musk is going to go to the moon. Richard Branson wants to build a lunar hotel, and he's not kidding, all right? One of the issues that's coming up is archaeological preservation of the lunar sites. 20, 30 years ago, NASA laughed at this idea. Right? Now they're not so sure. They came up with guidelines for it. It gets into a legal problem. They're monuments for all humanity. It's like the Vatican or the Hajj or the Taj Mahal or it's for all of us, right? Or the pyramids or whatever. The stuff, the landers, that's still the property of the United States government. So it's the property of all of us. But the 1967 Outer Space Treaty says that no nation can claim a heavenly body. Therefore, we can't legislate protection of the footprints, the stuff that's in the soil, right? The lunar tracks, all of that stuff, right? We can't on our own legally protect the sites like the national parks. Something's going to have to be done about it. So if somebody went up there, and grabbed the flags and tried to sell them on eBay, well, they can get busted, all right? But if somebody goes up there and puts his boot print next to Buzz, right now there's no, you have to be an idiot, but there's more push towards this. NASA did eventually release guidelines, because, all right, there's poop been sitting up there for 50 years. Astronaut poop, they dumped it on the surface. NASA would actually like to look at it. It's science. What happens to this stuff sitting out there for 50 years? So they came up with guidelines about doing research and approaching and all of that, the sites. What happened to the flags? They're probably bleached by now, but who knows? It's not such a joke now, because people are talking about lunar tour. I'd go take a look at the landing site. But it's like the national parks, all right? I don't know, Vice President Pence said back to the moon by 2024. That's optimistic, I think. But maybe a permanent moon base, all right? To use that to go to Mars or whatever, explanation of the other solar system. I think it's all ultimately the search for life. All right, and my own view on the matter is something like us is probably pretty rare. But life, microbial life, there's a good chance of it in the outer solar system, the moons of the large planets, right? So who knows? Well, thank you all for being so patient. I know it's a little much for the young ones, but that's it. Okay, yeah, thanks. Right.